Good to start, Lori.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We are going to talk about bullying, the state regulations, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's guidance and requirements, and our own Falmouth Public Schools policy. We have to update our bullying intervention plan, and it's time to do that. And this was a good time for us to talk about bullying and talk about the components of our plan. I'm Lori Durr. I'm the superintendent of Falmouth Public Schools, and I'd like to introduce Mary Gans, the director of policy and legal affairs for our district. Also with us is Ryan Weber. He will be managing the chat. And so what I ask, if you have any questions, if you would just add them to the chat, and Ryan will facilitate that, and we'll get your questions answered at the end of Mary's presentation. So at this time, Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Dorr. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I'm going to open my slideshow and hopefully share my screen here. And does that look okay, acceptable? So as I said, thank you. This is our anti-bullying presentation. And the first thing to know about bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation is that the Falmouth School District and the Falmouth School Committee we're committed to maintaining a school environment free from bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation. Information about bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation can be found in all of our student handbooks, the high school handbook, the Lawrence handbook, the Morris Pond handbook, and the elementary school handbooks. If you have any questions about the handbooks and the bullying information in there, I would encourage you to reach out to your particular school, and they can lead you to the right sections. And as Dr. Dorr mentioned, the school district is currently updating its bullying prevention and intervention plan, which is required under state law. All school districts are required to have a bullying prevention and intervention plan. And once it is finalized and approved by the school committee, we will be posting it on the school website and sharing it with families. So Massachusetts has a very comprehensive anti-bullying statute, which defines and prohibits bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation, It was adopted in 2010. The statute is Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 37(0). And in addition to the statute, the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which you'll hear me refer to as DESE throughout the presentation, DESE has adopted a comprehensive set of regulations which govern a school district's duty to notify parents and guardians of targets and aggressors when there's an incident of bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation, to notify the local police department when criminal charges may be pursued against an aggressor. And the regulations also address the confidentiality of student record information that may be related to an incident of bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation. And those regulations can be found at 603 Code of Massachusetts Regulations 49.00. School districts are also required to have a bullying policy, and Falmouth's policy, which essentially mirrors the anti-bullying statute, can be found. I have a link here, which you obviously can't link to at home, but on the school committee website, you can find it under policy JICFB. Under the statute and the regulations, there are some very important definitions that I will review with you. First of all, is the definition of bullying. Bullying is very specifically defined as the repeated use by one or more students or school staff of a written, verbal, or electronic expression or physical act or gesture or any combination thereof directed at a target that causes physical or emotional harm to the target or damage to the target's property, places the target in reasonable fear of harm or property damage, creates a hostile environment at school for the target, infringes on the rights of the target at school, or materially or substantially disrupts the education process or the orderly operation of the school. And I've bolded and underlined the word "or" there because all of those elements do not have to exist in order for an incident to constitute bullying. One alone could exist. There may be more. There may be multiple of those elements that exist, but only one is required. Bullying obviously also encompasses cyberbullying. And cyberbullying is bullying through the use of technology or electronic communication that, again, includes those exact same elements. And again, only one of those elements is necessary in order for an incident to constitute cyberbullying. You do not need more than one. You certainly could have a situation that has more than one, but only one element is necessary. The target of bullying is defined as a student against whom bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation has been perpetrated. Now, that's important because only students can be targets of bullying. Adults, staff members in the school cannot be targets of bullying. That is true under Massachusetts law. There is no law in Massachusetts, including the anti-bullying law that applies to schools, that identifies adults as targets of bullying. An aggressor under the bullying law is defined as a student or a staff member, including but not limited to an educator, administrator, school nurse, cafeteria worker, custodian, bus driver, athletic coach, advisor to an extracurricular activity, or paraprofessional who engages in bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation. So as opposed to target, where only a student can be a target, an aggressor can be a student or a staff member. And retaliation. So when you have bullying, you have somebody, a student or a staff member who is engaged in an alleged bullying incident, and then you have the target. But there's also, once a bullying incident has been reported, sometimes there is retaliation. Oh, you told on me, you squealed on me. So retaliation is defined in the statute as any form of intimidation, reprisal, or harassment directed against a person who reports bullying, cyberbullying, provides information during an investigation about bullying, cyberbullying, or witnesses or has reliable information about bullying or cyberbullying. And retaliation is strictly prohibited. And typically, when principals or assistant principals investigate a bullying or cyberbullying report, they will advise anybody that they're interviewing that retaliation is prohibited. So even though you may be involved in this incident, you are not allowed to retaliate against someone who has reported it, who has witnessed it, or has any information involving the incident. Conduct that happens, outside of school. There's often a misconception that the school can only discipline a student if the bullying occurred within the school day, and that's not accurate. So bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation can include conduct that happens outside of school if the conduct creates a hostile environment at school for the target, if the conduct infringes on the target's rights while at school, or if the conduct materially and substantially disrupts the education process or the orderly operation of the school. In addition, the use of a school-issued Chromebook or other school-issued technology or device to engage in bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation is strictly prohibited, whether that use occurs at school or outside of school. So it's really important to remind students that they may think that because they're at home and they're using Snapchat or Instagram or some other, technology to create a negative situation for another student. If that incident sort of bleeds into the school and creates a negative environment for the target at school, infringes on the target's rights at school, or just creates a substantial or material disruption at school, that conduct, even though it happened outside of school and off campus, that conduct can be subject to discipline under the law. And there have been some recent cases where in Massachusetts recently, in Hopkinton, and a recent case in California, which doesn't involve the Massachusetts law, but a federal court, and the case in Massachusetts, a federal court said off-campus activity may be subject to student discipline. And that in the Hopkinton case, the students tried to argue that they had free speech rights and their conduct occurred outside of school and they had a right to express themselves. But the court said because what they did to another student outside of school caused significant problems for the target at school and disrupted the school, then the school had a right to discipline the students. So bullying also may involve criminal activity. So while the Massachusetts anti-bullying statute does not make bullying or cyberbullying or retaliation a crime, some conduct that amounts to bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation may also violate criminal laws. For example, criminal harassment or a physical assault. We will always in Falmouth, and we're required to actually under the regulations, we will always consult with the school resource officer if we believe possible criminal behavior may be involved. And we would also very likely refer a target's parents or guardians to consult with the police as well. There's also, in addition to criminal laws, there are laws that we refer to as civil rights laws. So behavior that constitutes bullying may also involve discrimination or harassment in violation of state and federal civil rights laws. State and federal civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination or harassment on the basis of a student's membership in a protected class. For example, race, national origin, religion, disability, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, etc. Those are all protected classes. So if a student were to target another student based on the target's membership in a protected class, that would rise actually to the level potentially of a civil rights violation above and beyond. It may constitute bullying, but then it goes above and beyond that and is a civil rights violation. So I'm repeating myself, but this means, for example, that if a student repeatedly calls another student derogatory names at school or outside of school, based on the student's membership in a protected class, such conduct might not only constitute bullying under the Massachusetts anti-bullying statute, but it also may very well constitute discrimination, harassment in violation of the student's civil rights. And we in Falmouth will always address such conduct in accordance with all applicable civil rights laws. So some students may be more vulnerable to bullying and cyberbullying. While any student can be the target of bullying or harassment, the Massachusetts anti-bullying statute was amended in 2014 to specifically recognize that certain students may be more vulnerable to becoming a target of bullying harassment based on actual or perceived differentiating characteristics, including the following. And these that I've listed here, they may be hard for you to read, but they are all included in the statute as amended in 2014. And they include race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, sex, socioeconomic status, homelessness, academic status, gender identity or expression, physical appearance, pregnant or parenting status, sexual orientation, mental, physical, developmental, or sensory disability, or even association with a person who has or is perceived to have one or more of those characteristics. So what that last bullet means is if there's a student who is targeted because they associate with someone who may have one of those other characteristics, and the student is targeted in a repetitive manner, that student, even though that student may not fall into one of those other characteristics, because they're being targeted due to their association with a student with one of those characteristics, they would be considered a target of bullying. And very important to note, the U.S. Department of Education, at the Office of Civil Rights, which is under the U.S. Department of Education, which is a federal entity, they have very specifically said that students with disabilities are significantly, disproportionately impacted and targeted under the bullying laws far more than their non-disabled peers. And students with disabilities have additional rights that must be addressed in the IEP process or a 504 plan process, if and when they are found to be vulnerable to bullying or even vulnerable to being the aggressor in a bullying situation. So both targets and aggressors will be addressed in the IEP or 504 process if bullying is a concern. So elements necessary to constitute bullying, and this is important to keep in mind. Bullying and cyberbullying is repeated. It's not a single act. One single act does not constitute bullying. It has to be more than a single act. Bullying and cyberbullying is conduct that is directed at a target and is generally considered by experts in the field to be intentional conduct, not accidental. And I'm going to go back to that in a minute because there's an interesting case that came about. And this is also very important. Bullying, cyberbullying occurs in relationships where there is an observed or perceived imbalance of power. And it's very distinguishable from typical peer conflict. We have to remember that peers and students have conflict. We've always had conflict among students. Bullying really requires repetition, intentional, and an imbalance of power. Now, getting back to the intentional conduct, there have been a couple of cases where some students had a private Snapchat group, and they were making fun of other students in their school within that private group. They never expected the targets of their comments to see their comments or hear about them, but they did, because we all know with social media, it never stays private, things get out. And it caused significant disruption within the school. And the school was found, even though the comments were not directed to the targets themselves, because it was in a private Snapchat group among other students, still it got out. And because it caused problems at school for those who were discussed within the Snapchat group, the school was found that they were within their rights to discipline the students who were making those comments in that private Snapchat group. So possible effects of bullying and cyberbullying, which can be very serious. It can lead to or worsen the following for both targets and aggressors: mental health issues, physical health issues, relationship issues, behavior issues, academic issues, attendance issues, and substance use issues. Research has found that all of these issues can come about and worsen for students in the context of bullying or cyberbullying. It's very important to note anyone can report bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation. Staff members can, students can, parents, guardians can. And the anti-bullying statute in Massachusetts, it provides that reports can be made anonymously, but the statute also states that no disciplinary action can be taken against a student solely on the basis of an anonymous report. So just keep that in mind. It's understandable when people sometimes want to make an anonymous report, but that may tie the school's hands and not allow them to impose any kind of discipline. And reports can be verbal or written. You will see when we publish our bullying prevention and intervention plan, and we actually have it now, but there's a bullying reporting form that we have, and that we will always provide parents and guardians and students with that form. It's not required that form be filled out, but it's an option. You do not have to fill that form out in order to report bullying. You can report it verbally and we will still take the information, but we do have the form that's sometimes makes it easier for the school because it asks very pointed questions and contains a lot of important information that families can share in the form about the incident. In terms of our investigation obligations, the schools are obligated to promptly investigate all reports. So upon receiving a report, we will investigate it, but we also will take any and all preliminary steps that may be necessary to address the safety and well-being of the parties involved during the course of the investigation. So even though we haven't yet substantiated that bullying or cyberbullying has occurred, we will still see if we need to take some steps to make everyone feel safe while the investigation is ongoing. What happens when a report is substantiated? All parties will be notified and we will take all steps necessary to address and resolve the situation, including but not limited to imposing appropriate disciplinary consequences. Note that due to state and federal student and staff privacy laws, we are not authorized to tell the target and their parents and guardians what disciplinary action was taken against an aggressor unless it involves a stay away order or a no contact order or other directive that the target has to be aware of in order to report further violations. So for example, if there was no order that said the aggressor needs to stay away from the target, even if the school imposed some discipline on that aggressor, the school would not be allowed to tell the target and the target's parents or guardians what that discipline was. In addition to possible disciplinary consequences, there are other steps that the schools may take to prevent the recurrence of bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation. And these may include, this is not an exhaustive list, but limiting or denying the aggressor's access to certain areas in the school, increasing adult supervision in certain areas in the school, providing relevant educational and positive behavior skill building activities and resources, developing stay away orders, or sometimes they're called no contact orders, developing safety and action plans for addressing any future conduct, altering the aggressor's schedule. Now, we would alter the aggressor's schedule because they were the aggressor. We typically wouldn't alter a target's schedule. However, if a target or their family wanted their schedule to be changed, we would obviously take that into account and see what we could do. We would provide counseling or referral to other appropriate services for the target and or the aggressor. And we might arrange for communication between the target and the aggressor, such as mediation or restorative practices meeting. But I highlight this here. This would only be done if the parties and their parents and guardians mutually agree to this, because it has been found that as I mentioned before, a bullying relationship already involves an imbalance of power. And so mediation or restorative practices meetings, they're used cautiously and sparingly because they can exacerbate rather than alleviate the target's concerns, and they can elevate the aggressor's sense of power. So experts in the field really caution on the use of those types of meetings unless all of the parties are on board and agree that it would help resolve the conflict. Possible outcomes when a report is not substantiated. So when a report is not substantiated, all parties will be notified accordingly, just like they would be if it was substantiated. And it's important to note that even if a report is not substantiated, so what that means is that the conduct involved did not rise to the level of bullying or cyberbullying. Depending on the case, the school may still take some steps to address the circumstances and address the conduct that led to the report. Because even though bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation wasn't substantiated, the conduct may still nevertheless warrant disciplinary consequences, or it may warrant the use of restorative practices in an effort to address the issues and the relationships involved. So even though the school may say, no, bullying wasn't found, they're still going to address the situation appropriately so that all of the parties can move forward in a positive way. DESE has what's called a problem resolution system. So regardless of the outcome and investigation, whether bullying was found to exist or was not found to exist, we will always inform the parties involved that if they are dissatisfied with the outcome, they can appeal the matter to DESE by filing a claim with DESE's problem resolution system. The DESE PRS office handles a variety of claims, including claims regarding whether a school district properly responded to a report of bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation. Now, it's important to point out here, the PRS office will not overturn or change the outcome of the investigation per se. They will address whether the school followed appropriate procedures and protocols in conducting their investigation. So they will not necessarily say, oh, the school made the wrong decision. They didn't find bullying, but bullying does exist. We find that. They will not do that. They will just say the school did not follow the proper investigation protocols and the school needs to do some corrective action. In terms of prevention, we have age-appropriate curriculum and resources in Falmouth aimed at educating all students in an effort to prevent bullying, cyberbullying, and retaliation. All of our staff members receive bullying training. And in addition, I want to emphasize this, our counseling staff, we are extremely fortunate to have an incredible counseling staff on hand in Falmouth. They are highly trained and always available to support students and their families. And any staff member, if your child has a trusted adult in school, or if you need to reach out to someone who you feel comfortable reaching out to, whether it's a teacher or an assistant principal or a principal or a counselor, we encourage you to do so. And what can parents and guardians do to help with bullying situations? Talk to your child about bullying and acceptable behavior. Explain to them, how to treat others both inside and outside of school. Model how to treat others. Really try to keep the lines of communication open. I know I've raised 3 daughters myself. They're all in their 20s now. And I know that's really hard sometimes to keep the lines of communication open. And I think it's probably even harder now with the proliferation of so much social media that is out there that kids have access to, but it's really important to try and check in with your children and see how they're doing. And also, speaking of social media, talk to your child about their online activities. Talk about your family's rules and expectations around the appropriate use of devices and technology. You can set limits to encourage your child to take time for other socializing and other interests. You can set parent-guardian controls on your child's devices, which I'll talk about in a minute. Be aware of age restrictions for certain sites and apps. Some sites and apps that students are on are only for students who are over people who are 18 or older. But there's no way for those sites or apps to figure out the age. You can just click I am 18 or older and students can have access to that. I recommend that parents and guardians regularly check the apps your child has downloaded to ensure they are appropriate and being used properly. And this is important. Be aware that some apps are disguised to look like typical apps. If you see 4 small dots at the bottom of an app's image, it's an indicator that you can swipe to see more of what that particular folder holds. And sometimes these folders are used to hide apps or search engines that your child may be using. And for example, the Calculator Plus app, that doesn't have the 4 dots, but it looks exactly like the calculator app that people have on their phones. The only thing that is different, it has a little plus sign next to it, and it looks very, very similar. However, it is used to hide images and videos. And many, many young people use this app, and I'll show a picture next. It looks like that. So it looks just like your regular calculator app on your phone. But if you look closely where it says calculator, I know this isn't a great image, but there's a little plus sign next to it. That means that is not a calculator app. That is an app that is disguised to hide videos and pictures. And getting back to when I talked about putting in some parent guardian controls, there's a multitude of controls out there that parents and guardians can use, but one that I heard of recently, and I hadn't heard about it, it's called Bark. And it's, if you look at the website, www.bark.us, it's actually it does cost, there's some free aspects to it, but it does cost some money. And what it does for you is it allows you to, I'm trying to find the exact description of it. I don't want to misrepresent what it does. But it allows parents and guardians to get notified if there's any concerning behavior on a child's phone. So this is how it's described. The Bark app will monitor your child's phone so you don't have to. It monitors text messages, emails, and social networks for potential safety concerns. The app's algorithm detects potential risks like sexting, cyberbullying, and depression. It will even scan for slang or abbreviations that you as a parent or guardian might not know. If the app finds something, it will send a parent guardian an alert through email or text. And as a parent or guardian, you can't read the things that are on the phone, but the Bark app will just send you a message that says there's something to be concerned about. And on the Bark website, I just pulled it up today, and the figures keep changing, but they've been promoted through a lot of different news agencies or news shows, but right now 6 million children are covered by the Bark app. They have already found 629,000 severe self-harm situations have been detected through the use of the Bark app, and 2.6 million severe bullying situations have been detected. So like I said, unfortunately, it does cost money to get the full features of the app, but it is something that you may want to consider. Helpful resources. This DESE website has a lot of helpful information and resources regarding bullying and cyberbullying. And the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which is a federal website, also has extremely helpful information and resources on bullying and cyberbullying. You may have heard of stopbullying.gov. That is the federal website for bullying, and it has a wealth of information. So I know that was a lot to take into account and to hear, but I hope that this has been helpful in explaining what constitutes bullying and cyberbullying and retaliation, and what is involved when we receive a report. We always encourage parents and guardians to reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns. And we always want to support students and their families with any concerns they may have. If you have any questions or comments, you can place them in the chat, and Ryan Weber, I know I thank you for coming here tonight. We'll see if there are any questions. I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Thank you, Mary. That was really informative. I appreciate that. It doesn't look like we have questions at this time. So I will thank everyone for attending, and I think we can end that now.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.